power of the sun in the palm of my hands. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Sci-Fi Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are doing another movie review. This is Spider-Man No Way Home, and this is the spoiler-filled review. Yes, we're getting into it. We're getting into the nitty-gritty, baby. Yes. So much to discuss when it comes to spoilers of this film, yes. So the film was directed by Jon Watts and stars Tom Holland, Zendaya, and of course Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina. You know, you got Thomas Hayden Church as the Sandman once again returning. You got Jamie Foxx as Electro. And you get Rye Isfans as the Lizard. So yeah, as you know, as you saw from the previews, the villains returned from the various incarnations of Spider-Man on film over the years. The Sam Raimi trilogy, the Mark Webb trilogy, which you see up here, are now relevant again, which is really cool. And now, speaking of that relevance, it's the big elephant in the room, isn't it? Because the one thing that people are wondering, and I was wondering myself, I wasn't sure if it was going to happen, you know. There was a lot of talk about it at first, and then that talk kind of died down after a while when we didn't see any glimpse of it in any of the trailers, you know. Even the little TV spots, nothing whatsoever. So I kind of was like, oh, maybe it's not going to happen. Does it happen? We're in the spoiler-filled review now. And then, if you guys have not seen this movie, turn this review off, go watch the film, and then come back to it, because we're getting into spoilers here. Spoiler. Yes, it happens. We get to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield return as Spider-Man as well. Holy crap. It happened, folks. It happened. And was it all it was cracked up to be? Was it just a quick little cameo? Was it just like no big deal, you know, they showed up and they were gone and that's it? No. It was awesome. I loved what they did with it, you know. And of course, so the whole multiverse thing, you know, not only did the villains come back from the Sam Raimi movies and the Mark Webb movies, but the Spider-Men themselves returned. And they all got to meet, you know, it was so cool. So they went... So what happens in the movie is Ned Leeds somehow gets a hold of the ring that Doctor Strange wears to open up the different portals to the different time dimensions. And he just happens to open the one where Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man comes into play, and he just jumps through the portal and into the world that we're currently in, the MCU verse of Spider-Man. So, well, does that mean you know, Andrew Garfield Spider-Man's in the MCU now? What? And then we got to see Tobey Maguire did the same thing, the original actor to portray Spider-Man. It was just so cool, and I gotta say, I forgot how good Andrew Garfield is as Spider-Man. He was great. I was like, he could easily do it again. He could easily play Spider-Man once again in another movie if they wanted to, you know. Maybe they could have him in the Sony Spider-Verse or whatever with Venom and Carnage and Morbius now they got coming out. So, you know, there's that possibility. He could always play him again. He's plenty young enough, you know. And I thought he was so good. He was really funny, you know, charismatic, you know. I just forgot how good he was because the Amazing Spider-Man movies to me just weren't that good. They were kind of like generic, you know. It almost felt like a studio made it, like it wasn't like a Spider-Man fan that made it, you know? It just felt like a corporate studio film or something. Um, but but Andrew Garfield had the love of the character. He was a big Spider-Man fan, and that showed in his performance. And no different here. Tobey Maguire, great. I like how they used it. How Tobey Maguire was like the elder statesman of Spider-Man. You know, he was the older, the wiser one, the noble Spider-Man. You know, he was the wise one. I like that. I really liked it. There's a really fun part where they talk about how Tobey Maguire's version of Spider-Man, the webs come directly from his body, from his arm, instead of, him having to create this mechanism that shoots the web and then it runs out of web, and, and how it just comes. He's like, you guys can't do that? I thought that was hilarious. And what's funny and what else is amazing about this movie, how I said in my last review how well balanced it is. What's amazing is they mention, like, everything from all the other movies. They touch on so many different things, They ask Tobey Maguire, like, what's your favorite, what's the most difficult villain you had to deal with? He's like, and he mentions Venom. He's like, I dealt with this black globby thing from space. Like, and that's Venom, of course. And then Andrew Garfield talks about, Gwen Stacy and how she died and he couldn't save her, and they touch on so many different things from all the other movies, and I just love that. I mean, it's such attention to detail, and I love that, Especially being a Spider-Man fan, when you're a fan of the comics, you tend to pay attention to a lot of these details, and that's what I love about this movie. Where I didn't get that feeling so much with the other two movies. They don't stray to the comics too much, they kind of do their own thing with the MCU verse, but this one, I felt was a lot truer to the comic book Spider-Man that we know and love, and the ones that the comic books I grew up reading, when I was 5 years old. My father bought me the Spider-Man comics, and I just kept reading them every week. I had to have the newest issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, Spider-Man Annual, the one that's just called Spider-Man. So many of them that came out like every week or every month. Yeah, I was such a huge fan of Spider-Man. I had so many Spider-Man t-shirts every week wearing them, I was like a real fanboy. I spent a lot of time at the comic shops back in the day, but on that note, yeah, this just felt like the truest version of Spider-Man that we've seen in the MCU, at least. Like I said, I just love how the attention to detail in this movie, how they touched on a lot of mistakes that were made in the other movies, they just kind of had a laugh about it. Like Jamie Foxx says, I was blue, and they talk about the character of Electro, how he was done in Amazing Spider-Man 2. They even mention how Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, he mentioned how his son died, and obviously he's talking about, James Franco as Harry Osborn, in the original Sam Raimi trilogy, which was really cool, But it's like, they touch on every single little detail. Another thing I want to mention in the spoiler review is the character that I was talking about that shows up that's not part of any of the other Spider-Man universes is Daredevil from the Netflix TV show. So now they're trying to weave in some of the Netflix TV shows into the movies finally, which I thought was really cool. And I really liked Charlie Cox's Daredevil. I thought he was great, and I thought that show was awesome. So really cool to see him make his big screen debut in the MCU. So it was kind of a quick thing where, you know, he was going to be Peter Parker's lawyer, you know, because like I said, everyone was blaming Peter Parker, Spider-Man, for murdering Mysterio. So that's why he had to get a lawyer, and his lawyer just happens to be Daredevil, you know. I thought that was cool, though. But yeah, it's only a real quick scene just to kind of introduce him. But you know, we don't see him again after that. So maybe we'll see him in the next Spider-Man movie or his own movie. You know, maybe they'll have a new Daredevil movie, which would be great. You know, I'd love to see that. See the kick-ass Daredevil from the Netflix TV show, so we can make up for that dreaded, what was it, 2003 Ben Affleck version. Yeah, that was so bad. But yeah, another thing I loved about this one was how the Spider-Man, how they all come together and they work together, and we see them all in their classic suits from the different movies too. Andrew Garfield makes fun of Toby's like, what are you going to do, walk around dressed as the preacher or something, because he's just wearing his clothes for a while, and that's kind of a knock on, like, say, Spider-Man 3, when he didn't wear the mask that much, you know. And that starts out that way. He doesn't wear the costume until later on, you know, third act. And the third act in this movie is unbelievable. It's just mind-blowing. When you see all the Spider-Mans get together, you know, they team up against all the bad guys from all the movies. It's just amazing. It's just mind-blowing stuff. It's like that feeling when you watch Avengers Endgame and there's that huge battle, you know, against Thanos, and all the heroes in the Marvel Universe go against all the villains in the Marvel, you know. It's insane, you know. That's the kind of feeling you get, and it's just so much nostalgia, so much fan service, but it's just all worth it. I mean, I'm not going to say there's no fan service. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to please the fans in there. It's a crowd pleaser. So yeah, I just love the fact that all the Spider-Man came back and that they had great performances. You know, Tobey was great. And I'm so happy for them that they were able to come back and play Spider-Man one more time and do such a great job. And they got to not only play Peter Parker, but play Spider-Man in the full gear with the full outfit and do their thing and kick some ass one more time. And I also like how the continuity of it, because we see Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man talking to the Lizard, because that's who he dealt with in The Amazing Spider-Man, you know, and their history together. He starts talking about that, and we see a little interplay with Tobey Maguire and the Sandman, because he dealt with him in Spider-Man 3. So, you know, they talk about all the history of each movie, and like I said, attention to detail, guys. This is a great example of that. So I enjoyed it on every level, you know. And also I have to talk about what's to come in the future after we saw at the end how the film ends with, you know, he had to cast the spell so that no one would know that Peter's Spider-Man, you know. That was how it finally ended up, because it's like, you know, we gotta send all these villains back, so what are we gonna do? How are we gonna fix this? And he's like, well, can't we just go back to what we originally planned, that no one would know who I am? So he cast the spell again, so that nobody, and that means Zendaya as MJ, Ned doesn't know who he is. Nobody knows who he is. Not Aunt May, nobody. And that's another thing I have to talk about too, is Aunt May. What happens with Aunt May? she gets killed by the Green Goblin. Oh man. And that was really intense, really heavy duty, you know. Really heavy stuff. And they did a great job with that, you know. So there were stakes, and that would show you the weight of the situation. You know, we're dealing with these psychopaths, you know. I also love, another thing I loved about Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, once again, is that he has almost a little bit more of a backstory than we saw in the original Spider-Man, you know. We see that he has this schizophrenic side to him, you know. They really kind of delve into that, you know. He seems like he's just not all there, you know. And Aunt May sees that too, and she kind of tries to help him. And that's where they get the idea, you know, maybe we can cure these villains because they're kind of tragic characters. Each villain, the Sandman has a tragic side, Electro has a tragic side, and certainly the Green Goblin does. But the difference is the Green Goblin is a complete psychopath. Not like the others, they have some redeeming qualities. Norman is just too far gone, so that's what happens. He kind of gets through to some of the other villains, but it all goes awry once Green Goblin says, no, you know, he ain't gonna be turned. And gets Aunt May in the process, and they have an awesome fight, you know. Him and Spider-Man just really go at it, boy. Brutal scene. Brutal fight scenes there with and it gets so intense. Peter Parker grabs the glider, and he's getting ready to take out the Green Goblin once and for all, and then Tobey Maguire comes in and is like, no, we can't do that. Spider-Man doesn't kill people. That's what I was saying. The elder Spider-Man comes in to talk some sense into him, you know, and that's what I love, you know. Really cool stuff. I like Tobey being the older, more experienced Spider-Man. So, like I said, they were so well utilized. All the Spider-Men, they teamed up. They all had great action scenes, and the final battle was just amazing with all of them together. Yeah, just an absolutely fantastic film, and I implore you people to see this movie. You have to see it, and you have to see it in the theaters. Don't wait for it to come out on Blu-ray or streaming services. Go to the theater and see Spider-Man No Way Home. Thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Sci-Fi Corner. Tune in and blast off.